Welcome to another episode of Impact Quantum, where curiosity is currency and caffeine is code. I'm your MC Bailey, the semi-sentient British AI lady here to guide you through the shimmering labyrinth of quantum computing with a healthy splash of sarcasm, of course. In this episode, Frank Vigne and Candace Gillhoolley go full quantum Sherlock, unpacking everything from NVIDIA's GTC mea culpa to JPMorgan Chase's foray into truly randomness. We've got photonic dreams, hybrid whispers, and yes, rumblings from Montreal where you can't swing a qubit without hitting a physicist. All that plus a sneak peek into upcoming tech hubs, quantum conferences. And brace yourselves a moment of tea-spilling gossip from the hallowed halls of Redmond. So grab your preferred elixir, plug in your brain, and let's get quantum curious. But, first, have some dubstep.
All right, so hello and welcome back to Impact Quantum, the podcast where we explore the emerging field of quantum computing and focused on those who are curious about quantum computers and the quantum curious. That's kind of how we really need to work on that, Candace. Speaking of Candace, with me is the most quantum curious person I know, Candace Gillhoolley. So we've both been traveling, and thank goodness for automation and timing of posts and things like that, because that's definitely made things much easier.
Oh, absolutely. I scheduled my YouTube, I scheduled LinkedIn, and absolutely. And I really couldn't spend that much time, like just kind of sitting there pontificating, on what is my thought about the latest in quantum. So exactly. So, and you were busy too, right?
Yep. I was in Raleigh, North Carolina, at Red Hat headquarters, kind of doing some planning and whatnot for our product and what's going to be coming down the pike a bit, and kind of what the priorities are generally. But I have to say it's been an interesting week in quantum, because I think the number one thing I kind of noticed was Jensen Huang last week at GTC kind of walked back a lot of his CES comments, which kind of disparaged quantum computing. So it's been an active year in quantum computing, right? Because it's one of those technology things where it kind of goes and fits and starts. It starts, and then it kind of becomes like, oh my God, we're on the verge of a breakthrough, and then it kind of like fizzles out. But I think this time, the fire is going to catch. What do you think?
You know what? I agree with you. At first it was, lots of announcements. I mean, we've only been around for this season has been for the first 3 months of the year, basically, right? Not even the whole time. So, every day there were these announcements. People were breaking through, innovating with certain technology. It was coming out of Germany, then it was coming out of China, is coming out of the US. Boom, 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 boom. All the major players were telling you something was going on. And then there was this kind of backlash, I don't think to say backlash, but a little bit of bitterness was coming out, let's say, from academia, because they really are about the science and the data and the accuracy, and then that kind of caused like a tension a little bit.
Yeah, because it's been an interesting year, and I mean, you don't have, in our modern society, you don't have progress without controversy, right? So probably the first thing, and I guess the setup for this year was Willow at Google made their announcement where they achieved the milestone. And then in CES, that was like December. And then in January, first week of January, Jensen Huang had kind of said, kind of trash talked, for lack of a better term. I'm summarizing because I drove quite a bit yesterday. But it was nice to I got in kind of late, so I'm relying a little bit more on the energy drinks than I should today. But
you're doing fine. I'm
doing fine. So Jensen Huang kind of like trash talked, for lack of a better term, or really kind of was very pessimistic about the timeline for a functioning quantum computer. And then that kind of tanked a lot of quantum stocks early in the year. And then a week goes by, maybe 2 weeks, Bill Gates says, "Hey, Jensen, I respect you, but I think you're wrong on this one." And then there were a number of other announcements, like you're talking about, from Germany, China, the UK, et cetera, et cetera. And then there was GTC last week, which is NVIDIA's big conference. We're recording this on March 28th. And basically the gist of it was Jensen kind of apologized and said he was wrong to say what he said. And it kind of walked back a lot of his more critical comments. And there was a lot of news about quantum at GTC last week. And I know you did some kind of reading up on it.
Right. I was just going back for a minute and thinking about, the timeline and how we were talking about, we've spoken about Condor and we've talking about Cloudflare, and that got us into really a lot of like cryptography conversations. Then Google came out because they wanted to really handle the error correction issue. And then we had D-Wave. And it is really exciting. And then there was Psi Quantum, who was really delving deep into photonic quantum. And then, it just kind of keeps going forward. And then China makes an announcement. And then just this year alone, you're right. Everything that's been coming out and increased funding. So I do think the fire has caught.
Yeah.
100%.
I've been through a couple of these waves now, because I really got into this in 2018, 2019. And I've seen a couple of fires catch on, but I think this time it's starting to last. Like if you ever try to start a charcoal grill, like doesn't always catch the first time. But each subsequent time, because the charcoals are hotter, and it seems to be a little easier. And I think we're starting to see that now. Will this be the time it catches for real? I think it's too soon to say. But I think that this is just I mean, I don't know. Like, there's a lot going on, and like, there's a lot of, because, and this is a good episode to kind of catch up, because we had a couple of episodes with guests. We had the guys from Quantum Night. We had Jordy on, and
That's
Jordy
right.
Rose.
He's running now. He's running
across Canada. Yeah.
He is running as we speak, right?
It'd be cool if he said he's going to have a website and blog. It'd be cool if there was like a thing you kind of track his progress.
Yeah, no, I'd like that. And that's right. And then today we spoke with Simon Muscat.
Yep. Which that show will be out a week after this one.
That was a fantastic show. Yep. I really, really enjoyed it. He really opened up my mind to the idea of photonics.
Right.
And, and because that's something that, they're really interested in kind of stamping out there. And so, that was truly fantastic. I feel like every time I learn one thing, it exposes 10 more things that I don't know.
Yeah, we were talking about that today. First you learned about what qubits are, and then you learn about, the different types of qubits. And it's like, well, now there's also virtual qubits. And it's one of those things where if you don't come in with a beginner's mindset and kind of excited about learning, it's not the space for you. You know what I mean? Even I think in general IT is, right? But the short of it is there's just been constant innovation here. Like one of the press releases I saw this week was JPMorgan Chase had announced that they are using quantum computers to advance a real world use case of coming up with truly random numbers, right? Which is pretty interesting.
And if they come out successfully with that, they're saying, look, essentially we are going to own the financial market in terms of best practices and everything, right?
Right.
Um, Everything financial when it comes to quantum. Um, and that's crazy. I didn't even know about it. Now, why would I know about it? But now that I do know about it, I'm like, well, okay, like what does that really mean? And you know me, I'm very much of the idea that I want everyone to collaborate, right? And that I could understand and see how certain sectors, based upon the qubits needed, and the data, the amount of data that they have, which is super important, is going to determine the kind of quantum mechanics that they're going to be using to create their systems, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I didn't really know, it really kind of blew my mind. And I don't know why that should blow my mind when, Google comes out with one thing and Microsoft comes out with another, and, and then basically you have NVIDIA who's kind of leading the way. And, because they're really, really good communicators.
Right.
And that's essential in
Well,
any
and
of
there's
these
also,
companies.
getting back to what you said earlier, was there was a lot of pushback on Microsoft before their announcement of the Majorana chip,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because there's a lot of people in academia saying like, well, you really didn't do anything, didn't really prove anything new. And uh, I would be a fool to say I understood all the research things that came out of it, right? But it's interesting is that I think you're going to see, to your point, academia is going to have one perspective, and we are in the middle of the commercialization of what has largely been an academic subject, quantum physics, right? It's largely been the sole domain of academics, um, government researchers, that sort of thing, right? So, but now we're starting to see, startups in this space, right? So you're going to have a little bit of brash or more, brash marketers that may or may not want to stretch the truth about their capabilities, and that's not unique in the IT industry. Come on, let's be real. And one would even say Microsoft has a. It's not the first time Microsoft may have, stretched the truth a little bit, or rephrased or shine a different type of light on the truth.
Well,
And I'm
I
not
mean,
knocking
when
Microsoft. I mean, I'm talking about like, the
no, no,
olden
no.
days.
I know, I understand. And they were really excited about talking about what, they were doing. And it was really exciting what they were doing. And they never said this is like the be all end all answer of everything.
That's true.
Like we were
Like in
talking.
the press release, the first paragraph was like, we had this major breakthrough, which is true. And they
Exactly.
never admitted to it.
So
You just have to read the whole thing to get the whole truth. Like the first paragraph. And in fairness, they've been working on this like 20 years, right? In one form or the other. And they had a breakthrough, and I think they wanted to share it with the world.
exactly. And and that is exciting and that's needed because it gets people talking. What the heck is quantum mechanics? What is,
Right.
what is quantum computing? What does it mean? And what does it mean to me? And what is it going to mean to my kids?
Right. And
And
if
if you
you're
don't have kids and you're thinking about what is it going to mean to the overall society if it's coming and it is the next step, right?
exactly, and I
Y-
think
y-
that there's a definite, there's a definite, I think, approach for if you're a CTO or a CIO. And clearly, if JPMorgan Chase financial, they're in a different kind of world. But if you're just a generic company, well, that sounds terrible. But if you're just kind of like a company that is not in a space where quantum computing advancements are an obvious opportunity slash threat to your business, this is something that I think should be on your radar. Is it going to be on the front burner? Probably not, but it has to be in the back burner. It has to be in the back of your mind, right? I think it's important if you are in that role or aspire to be in that role. You should be I mean, right now, I do think that quantum computing is still a little bit away, right? I don't think it's going to be, decades. I don't think it's going to happen tomorrow, but sometime between now and, a decade from now, it's going to have a major impact on every business, right? A little bit of a spoiler.
Yeah, I mean, but also remember, it's not going to be the answer for everybody.
Right.
And it doesn't have to be. And there are things that, quantum computing is going to be able to do, like create an encryption for a system that is analog, so that they can use that because they're a small business
Mm-hmm.
and they have a small amount of data relatively, and they are going to, they're not going to have to go all quantum or hybrid, let's say, because it's just not needed. Like, not everything is for everyone, even though sometimes they make, bikinis in, all kinds of sizes, or they make certain kinds of pants in all kinds of sizes. It doesn't
mean
mean
it's appropriate for everyone.
doesn't mean
Right.
that really works. Sorry. Life is a little tough.
That's a good way to put it. I mean, but I think people should be aware of quantum computing. And I also think that, someone like you who's a marketer, you're an experienced marketer, if you're getting in on this now, because at some point there's going to be a real market for people to market their quantum hardware, their quantum code, their quantum, like there's going to be an entire ecosystem built out. And you think about, like, let's pick a hardware company like Dell, right? Dell was famously started by Michael Dell in his dorm room and stuff like that. But in order to scale, he needed to hire marketers. He needed to hire accountants. And I think an appreciation or understanding for this type of hardware is going to require, or if this becomes an industry, when this becomes an industry, I think people are going to need to have expertise in these spaces. And the best time to get experience is now. Like, we live in an age where we're just surrounded by information all the time. And maybe instead of scrolling through TikTok videos, hit up a YouTube video, like, how do quote qubits work? What are they do? What types of problems can they solve? Why are they more effective at certain types of situations in compute than others, right? Like, it's just to get a basic conversational kind of, more depth than your average cocktail conversation, but less depth than, say, a lead coder interview at like a big tech company.
I agree. And I'm going to jump back to something that we previously were talking about at GTC 2025 that just happened. So they had a day of quantum.
Right.
And they decided that they are going to continue to do that. And, I just did a little search. And so I see there is Quantum Days 2025 in February in Toronto, Canada.
2026 or 2025?
Oh, I'm sorry. Oops, we already missed that. Okay. But we'll have to fix that one.
But maybe future Candace has developed a time machine and can
do that. But for example, there is Quantum Tech coming out April 14th to 16th in Washington, D.C.
Right, not that far from me. So I'm going to see if I can score a media pass there.
Right. And then, where is that? Oh, that's Albuquerque, New Mexico. But IEEE is doing a whole quantum week.
Right. So the fact that these are happening tells you that the writing's on the wall. This is going to happen. And there's been a lot of, money put at this, a lot of attention put at this. And this isn't an overnight Johnny come lately type of technology. People have been talking about this. I mean, your dad worked on quantum research at IBM a number of years ago. And, now we're looking at, we're like 30, 40 years into this, the idea of this and the research that goes into it. And I think at some point, the fruit, the quantum tree is going to bear fruit, and we're going to see this ecosystem explode overnight. And
Oh, absolutely, because there's so much that's involved and there's so many different people coming at it from so many different angles. Um,
absolutely.
that's being sliced up in a really beautiful way to me because I'm all about collaboration,
Hmm.
but which is a very Canadian thing. But the idea that that these companies can come together, and they can decide, look, like that's going to be that's going to be the photonics qubits, right?
Right.
Um, and this is going to be the ion qubits, and you know for the different needs that we have, because again it's about who has the most data that they need to manage and they need to protect with encryption
Right.
for data security. And
Absolutely.
that's
Well, then,
so.
I mean, I think the first split you're going to see, honestly, in the quantum industry is you're going to have people who are in the security space, the encryption space, like folks like Quantum Knight.
Uh-huh.
And I would wager very heavily, and future Frank could come back on the show and say, was I right or not? Is that the quantum day in DC is going to be heavily focused on national security encryption type issues.
Right.
Maybe less on the, let's save the planet and, you know,
No,
discover new drugs and stuff like that. Although I could
no.
be wrong. Because if you look at kind of like what the potential is for national security and quantum computing, what's at risk is very, very high risk. And I think that, having worked at big tech companies where we did organize events in DC, the agenda was a little different in DC as it was to like everywhere else. You know what I mean?
Right.
And if you even at the Microsoft technology centers, right, like, we would tailor them to whatever industry is popular in town, right? So the Minnesota one was very healthcare focused. The DC one was very public sector focused. Detroit was very manufacturing focused. I mean, so, it's smart. Well, I don't look who I'm talking to. I don't need to tell you. Like, first rule of marketing is know who you're marketing to, right?
Absolutely. And that's the point of the show, is to
Right.
you know service the the minds that are the physicists and the academia, so they're excited about what we're talking about,
Hmm.
and as well break it down and explain it to non-technical people, because it's really fascinating. I mean, it blows my mind all the time. Like, I just ran a search on 2026 and I see there is something like already four announcements of conferences in Canada alone, between Montreal, Toronto, and Ottawa.
Right.
And that is incredibly exciting to me. That's also shows me that Canada being involved in what's going on, it's vitally important. They're one of the top 10 countries of
Right.
information is coming out of right now, um, about what's going on with quantum mechanics. And that's just, again, like I said, coming at it from all these different angles is just absolutely brilliant, because it's the best minds. And ugh, I love it. And yes, my father, um may he be in peace, he was working on quantum physics in the 70s.
Right. So like way, way, I mean, really in the game a long time, right? And I'm
Right.
sure there were people at IBM kind of scratching their heads, like, why are we dealing with quantum physics, right? Like, so like clearly, like, if it was really, if we think it's cutting edge now, I would imagine in the 70s this would have been sci-fi slash cutting edge stuff.
Right.
And
Exactly.
big
Like,
and big props to companies like that who, they don't
supported it, like.
supported it, right? So
They
there
did.
was, I'll spill a little bit of tea, and I won't name names. So when Microsoft did their announcement, and they've been working on the, topological qubits for a while, and one former Microsoft executive who most people wouldn't know the name. So this isn't Ballmer, this isn't Gates, this isn't Satya Nadella. Basically had on LinkedIn, and I'm connected to this individual on LinkedIn, had basically commented or reshared the post like, congratulations, researchers. I know you've been working at this for 20 years. And he was in a very high position 20 years ago. And this guy was known for cutting costs. All the Microsoft employees know exactly what I'm talking about. But he wrote this long flowing comment / post on congratulating them on this, and he knows that they've been working about it so long. But I would put real money on the fact he was probably pressuring them to stop wasting their time and money. I don't know that for a fact, but that's just something he would do. So for him to kind of congratulate them, I'm sure somebody who's been in there long enough are kind of like grumbling under their breath, like, you tried to cut it. I don't know. So that's it. I'll stop spilling tea now.
Okay. That was fun. There you go.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, but it's just funny, it's a long play, right? Well, in the 1970s, it definitely was a long play, right? In the early 2000s, it definitely was a long play. I think the question is now in 2025, is quantum computing still a long play? I think it is, but not that long.
Okay. I agree. Like, I think that, obviously the tail of it is, the future. Right. But with all honesty, with these, remember we had a conversation, and I'm not gonna release the name because we're gonna tape the show, I think, next week, with someone who had an API that they were already giving out to a network of people. Mm-hmm. That was involved with a hybrid system.
Yes.
Remember?
I know what you mean. Yeah.
And so, we're not going to release that, but we're going to be taping that show next week, which I'm super excited about.
So stay tuned. And if you're not already subscribed, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Right.
I love it. And I'm the marketer, and look what you do. I love it.
So I've learned from you, though.
Oh, you're so sweet. But no, really, and the stuff that she was talking about to me was like, again, next level, because I didn't realize how close it is in certain ways. It's just, it's closer and closer and closer. And that's why I think that legitimately, like, in the next, I dare say 2 to 3 years. I'm not even going to say 2 to 5 years. I'm going to say the next 2 to 3 years, there's going to be hybrid solutions that are going to be able to be applied.
Absolutely.
And not just obviously in the same industry. It's going to be different industries because they have to stay specific. Right. And go after, their goal. And then once they solve, they solve the error correction and figure out how many qubits it can deal with. And once they solve, the scalability, then there's going to be these use cases that are just going to explain it to everybody.
Exactly. Suddenly it's going to become far more practical. Mm-hmm. Once error correction, I think error correction and scalability are they're not the same, but I think they're related. But once error correction gets cracked, once that problem gets solved, I think the floodgates were really going to open. I think that's going to be the Netscape IPO moment. If you're old enough to remember, like the .com boom, what really kicked it off was Netscape IPO'd and was just phenomenal, blew everything away. And that was in August-ish 1995. And, the .com boom shortly thereafter followed. I think that error correction is probably going to be more akin to that moment. But again, like, I have a history of being ahead of the times, right? Like, I was a tablet PC MVP because I really felt that the tablet PC platform was ready for mainstream. As time would turn out, turns out the iPad was the better bet, right? And so I kind of like temper my predictions based on that. But when I was when I was at Microsoft when I interviewed for the job at the MTC, I had basically was talking about quantum computing because I think I'd just come back to the Microsoft research thing I was exposed to it really for the first time. And I basically said, mark my words, within 1 year, quantum computing will come up in customer conversations. And, as we got to 10 months, started getting nervous on that prediction. There was some money on the line, and definitely a lot of pride. But sure enough, 11 months and a week, 2 customers back to back, unrelated, and basically hit up our MTC to have a quantum conversation.
Isn't that
Like,
interesting?
so it's like it'll have, but I think you're right. I think the time frame is a lot closer to 3 years than 5. And I think there's also too, like the notion of what is a practical quantum computer mean, right? And this was, we didn't answer the questions. Sorry, spoiler alert, in our conversation that'll be out next week. But we did kind of broach the subject, right? So in Red Hat, there's this term, and I think AWS, I've heard of AWS, not so much when I was at Microsoft. Maybe it's a new phrase. Is the whole notion of what's the day 2 operations look like, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can build something, you can engineer something, you can deploy it. But day 2 is really when things start breaking.
Oh,
right?
yes, bugs are coming out.
Well, it needs maintenance. It's like you get a new car, right? You get a new car, it's wonderful, everything's great, and then it's going to need an oil change. Right. Obviously not, hopefully not on day 2. It's going to need new tires. The tires are going to be rotated, like that sort of maintenance cycle, right? Or what really keeps the lights on. What's that going to look like for a quantum computer, right? Or how is the quantum computer going to fit into the data center, right? What are the people that have to, rack it up and power it in, plug it in, right? What's their experience going to be like? What's that going to look like? And I don't think we really know just yet, right? And I think one of the things, tying back to IBM, right, is what made IBM was the fact that people were building computers in research labs, usually related to World War II decryption efforts, right? They're building them in research labs, usually in secret, right? Custom builds. But I think what made IBM successful in that business, they basically made the business where they sold the thing already built, and you just basically wheel it in and plug it in, right? And this is back when computers were the size of, would require massive forklifts and stuff like that to put in. But they did build the box that you could just shove into your basement somewhere, right? And plug it in, right? Before that, it was really a hobbyist type of market where you would just, kind of assemble the bits themselves. Same thing with the personal computer in a very real sense, right? The Altair was, you couldn't really buy one, as I understand it. This is before my time, and my family was too broke to afford a computer like that then, right? You couldn't buy it in a box. You got it as a kit and you assembled it, or you cobbled the parts together. It really wasn't until something like the IBM PC came out where it was this box. In this case, you could lift it up, and you plugged it in, right? It was so. As I understand it, there's not really a lot of companies now where I can call up and say I need a quantum computer delivered, and I plug it in and set it into my house, right?
Exactly.
Now we're in the era of the cloud, right? So theoretically, I could do that with Amazon and Azure and Google and stuff like that. Theoretically, but again, like
it's not made for the everyman. Like
no.
you know, what I'm saying like
or every woman.
Or excuse me, I'm sorry. Every person. And it's not right now, and the needs of the every person do not even like hold the same type of gravity as a larger company that's dealing with, people's personal information and their address and where all their money is, or and all this information about them. They know about all the medicines they take, for example. Those are the type of reasons why we need the quantum mechanics. But yeah, it's going to take a very long time. And my history is my dad at IBM carried home a computer they just weren't using anymore. And for the first time ever, I mean, I saw what a computer was in 1984, and it was, it was the most fantastic thing I'd like ever seen. It was like magic in a box, And I remember we played decathlon.
Nice. Bruce, that was a
The
Bruce
Olympic game
Jenner's decathlon
decathlon.
one. Yeah, I remember
That's
that
when I
game.
would play Bruce Jenner, right? And
Yep.
and you would run by hitting two keys right next to each other as fast as you can. Um, but yeah, like look at I mean, how much has advanced since then? And then all of a sudden, you got Macs, and then how are they interacting with the PCs, and is that seamless? How are these hybrid quantum computers, are they going to be able to interact with successfully with, analog computers, so that we can, move forward and everyone can kind of get involved with it? you know,
Right.
these are all the questions to ask, right? It's going to be messy and fun,
Hmm.
super exciting, right? And for dealing with real problems. And I never thought, it's not my mindset to be all like security, security. I'm not like that, right? But when I saw um for example, like when my dad died, then they tried to steal my mom's identity,
Right.
right? And that was a hot mess to kind of untangle and stuff, and that shouldn't be able to happen. So
Right.
imagine the encryption, like nice little quantum encryption locks. I can kind of see the icon in my eyes right now.
Right.
The
Well,
little
and
the
there's
little
a really good YouTube video. It's not one we produced, but there's a called just search for Quantum Apocalypse by the Y Files. And it's a pretty good run through of, I think it's a little more alarmist and dramatic. But that's kind of, I get it. That's what makes people click, right? On the video, but it's basically like a
Yeah.
preview of what it would look like once a quantum computer is available that can crack encryption. And I was talking to somebody not that long ago. Um, for all we know, somebody's already built one,
Correct.
right? And if you look at kind of the history of nation states and
Hmm.
security apparatuses around the world, there was the most powerful computers in the 40s were secret,
Hmm.
right? And it wouldn't be a surprise if that were the case today, right? We don't know.
I, I 100%. And what I'll say to back that up is, I remember when I was at Columbia University, and we had the most amazing telephone that was provided to us by the university. So everybody was only on like a secret extension that you could do all these things. You could leave a message and not actually call somebody back,
Oh yeah,
but get
yeah,
credit
yeah.
for it. Like all that kind of great stuff. And I met this really nice guy, and he took the phone and he connected it into my computer.
Nice.
And then I saw whatever was on what they called, the World Wide Web,
Hmm.
back in 94. And that was crazy sauce. And I remember, you know, that I figured out at Columbia that I had an email address. No one knew what email was. I mean, this is before AOL,
Yeah,
right? And
this was the 90s, so it was a very different. The first time I got on what we would call the World Wide Web would have been 1993, and that was this text-only browser, and it
Mhm.
was on a VT102 terminal in um, in the university. Eventually, I got it working on my terminal emulator at home, but you, I mean, you basically was just text, right?
Yeah.
And it was a different era. And I remember when I saw like it done on with graphics, it was just mind blowing. Like,
Yeah, because mine couldn't handle the graphics yet. But what I just wanted to finish to say is that
Hmm?
I then sent an email to my dad at IBM.
Oh, that's so cool.
I sent an email to my dad, and then my phone rang.
Nice.
And then he's like, "What are you doing?" And
He's
I'm
like,
like,
was that
"What?"
you?
Well, I'm like, "Yeah, I sent you an email, Dad. My email is for IBM stuff and government and military,
Oh, okay.
right?
So he
Like
was
that's
like,
what so he was like, how did you figure this out?" And I'm like, blah, 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 blah,
that's
and
funny.
because he was an engineer, just to drive him crazy, and because of who I am, I used all my words. Um
Yeah,
but it was really exciting, and I just adventurous in that type of way. You know what I
right,
mean? I can't do his side, but that's why I am the curious. I am the tech curious, and I smell a change that is going to be really exciting, and I want to be able to understand it because nothing's going to replace me. I'm just going to understand it so that it can augment what I already do,
right,
right?
right. No, absolutely. I think it's an exciting time to be in this, and if you're curious about it, just learn. We live in probably like one of the most a time when I can go to ChatGPT, ask it to explain me something. I can go to YouTube, right? I can even ask ChatGPT, can you recommend a number of YouTube videos or playlists for me to watch to learn about this? And I even built a custom GPT agent where I can kind of like give it my background and where my understanding of knowledge is. It's like, can you explain it to me in these terms? And I mean, it's very helpful in learning stuff, and highly recommend everyone within the sound of my voice to do that.
And
Always
you
be
know what?
learning.
We also always be learning, but you know what? We
Mhm.
write about it almost every day.
Yep.
And we're gonna get more onto the actual quantum
Mhm.
impact quantum site. But you
Which
know
right
what I
now
like
is
to do?
admittedly not the best. I know. I know.
We're working on it. We're working on it, and I'm doing my proper nudging, and it's
Hmm.
gonna it's gonna it's gonna happen. But I really think it's important, you know, e- every week when we talk, we should talk about what was exciting
Right.
specifically this week that they made these announcements, because I really
Right.
wanted so I went through a list to go through, and we talked about the JP Morgan,
Hmm.
which is genuine randomness in number generation.
Hmm.
Do you want to speak to that for a moment?
Yeah. So and we did kind of talk about this before, the previous one where somebody managed to cheat a casino by
Right.
reverse engineering how they were coming up with random numbers. So whenever you generate a random number on a conventional computer, they're really what they call pseudo random numbers because a computer isn't really good at generating random numbers. So there's all sorts of games you can play with that to kind of mimic randomness, whether that's time of day or movement of mouse. But at the end of the day, if you really know what you're doing, you can reverse engineer and produce random numbers that'll come up with the same pattern, right? So if you're doing anything in Python, if you say like the random seed is this, that's basically what you're doing. And so you can get reproducible results if you put in the same random seed. So if I put in random seed 1, 2, 3, 4, and it gave me a list of 10 random numbers, I could share that same code with you, and it would almost all the time give you the same 10 random numbers, right? So which is a problem if you need absolute randomness, like for a lottery, right? Like, that's what they say, everything's audited by a particular auditing firm. And they go through a great deal of length to, be fair and produce random results, which is why, whenever I see video poker or anything video related in terms of gambling, I do not trust it at all.
Exactly.
Um,
Right.
but to that end, though, if you have a quantum computer that can take advantage of these quantum effects and quantum states, um, you can get genuine, true randomness and unpredictability, which is going to have an impact in terms of encryption. It's going to have and security and all sorts of things. Plus, I think what they're not saying by not saying what they're saying by not saying it is that it's going to give them a significant advantage, because if you can start producing random numbers, you can start studying what true randomness is, and theoretically, a really clever, quant could start thinking, how do you apply kind of randomness to the stock market prices, right? Like the stock market movements day to day are definitely random, or are they? I don't know. But it's an interesting use case, I'll say. And it's not going to cure cancer like in and of itself, but I think that if you have a company like JPMorgan Chase that is relying on some quantum technology to do one thing, I think that's going to start opening up the floodgates, because there's going to be another investment bank. It's like, why are they spending so much money on this? Clearly they're clever and they know what they're doing. So how else can we leverage quantum computers, right? So you're going to start seeing it kind of leak in like that. That's what I think. But one of the things that I thought was interesting was you were telling me, because right now, when you think about the big tech industry, right, it's basically Silicon Valley, Seattle, and kind of New York, right? And as someone, but I was very encouraged because there's a couple of quantum hotspots in the U.S., and it turns out I live near one of them.
Right. So that's you're exactly right. So they're making these quantum computing hubs, and the emerging cities are Santa Barbara, Chicago, Boston, College Park, Maryland.
Nice.
Right? And Boulder, Colorado.
Nice.
And these cities host significant investments and collaborations with major tech firms and universities. And so that's kind of the fun combination, is that they want to have the tech people and they want to have the university driven academia together.
Which I think for the foreseeable future, academia and tech here is going to be a combined. They're going to be tied to the hip.
Absolutely. And you know what? It'll be a really good thing, because they're going to understand, well, they understand the science of it all, but even in other fields, having the scientists involved with how computer systems run for, things that involve with onboarding and understanding how people think, like that stuff's brilliant, really exciting. So yeah, we have the emergence of these quantum computing tech hubs, which is very exciting. And in fact,
I'm excited because there's an emerging tech hub, and I won't have to relocate to the West Coast.
That's fantastic.
And it's near the IKEA. But realistically, the tech hub is because the University of Maryland is in College Park. It's not because it's near an IKEA.
Right. No, absolutely. Like, for example,
that was a joke.
I know. It was good. It was good. I was going with it.
Yeah. Thank you for preserving my ego on that one.
Oh, it's all good. It's all good. You're so smart. No, actually, we were talking to this physicist who was in Montreal. And remember, he was saying,
he's going to be on a future episode.
Yeah, like you can't throw a stick without hitting another physicist in Montreal.
Well, yeah,
and there's
Montreal is also. One of the things that bothered me, and I'm not going to call out which big tech company I used to work for, but if you're paying attention, or you look me up on LinkedIn, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about.
You would know.
There was one particular time I was trying to transfer internally because my job was moving to the West Coast. And I was trying to get a job where I would either be remote or because for family reasons, I didn't want to relocate. And constantly it was like, no, this person has to be in, near a city with a space needle, apparently. And I was like, why? Like, it doesn't make this is before the pandemic. It doesn't make any sense. Like, there was one particular position I was up for where it was basically working with nonprofits. And just a drive from my old house to the office downtown DC, I passed the headquarters for like 80% of the nonprofits they're supposed to be working for, and the other remaining 20% were either headquartered in Boston or New York. So it's like, why do I have to move out to that? And it was kind of like, well, innovation can only be done. Basically, I got a couple of answers, but finally it was innovation can only be done here on campus, which I thought was the funniest thing I ever heard. Like innovation is confined to a thing. So I'm glad to see that there's some geographical diversity when it comes to kind of quantum hubs within the United States, right? So you mentioned, Colorado, California, Maryland. I'm glad to see Maryland on the list. And I would imagine also probably Westchester County, where IBM has their big facility.
Yeah, that's true. They have their big research facility there in Armonk, right?
Right.
So
And there was a YouTuber, maybe we can get her on the show. That would be cool. It's Hannah Fry. She's a big like TV science personality in the UK. And she's also a big YouTuber, and she did a whole thing, presumably in Armonk, like
okay,
walking through
yeah,
the.
that would be that was where
That
my
would be
dad
cool.
worked. So
Yeah.
that would
So
make
like,
sense.
it'd be cool to do that, and um, you know, but I mean, it's just having everything in one geography, I think, is also kind of
Oh,
encourages groupthink to a degree, which I think doesn't help anyone. I don't know. Does that make sense?
well, but to that point, in terms of groupthink, I just came across this week that NVIDIA establishes a quantum computing research center, and they're doing it in Boston, and they're
Interesting.
working with Harvard and MIT,
Right. And that
right?
makes sense,
And they
right? Yep.
yeah, absolutely. That's where they want to be. It's like, they call university, they call, well, it depends on who is actually making the statement, but essentially the equivalent to MIT here in Canada is University of Waterloo.
Right.
And there's a lot going on at the University of Waterloo as well. They're just not necessarily communicating what they're doing because they're not ready yet, or they're working on something that they don't want to discuss yet, right? But like you were saying, there's a lot of places that are working on stuff but haven't really talked about it yet. Like,
Right.
Israel is one of them. Like,
Right.
I remember we had a conversation with that guy that we still had to get on for taping.
He will be
How
on. Yeah.
exciting these
Well, yeah, and
quantum.
it's just like, it's one of those things where I think the pandemic taught people that you can collaborate anywhere in the world.
Mhm.
I think the pandemic also taught that, you don't have to be in person all the time, face to face, to collaborate.
Right.
And, this is a personal issue because my wife now has to go back to the office every day, which has caused a lot of, logistical chaos and stuff like that. So maybe I'm on that soapbox for personal reasons today, but
No, it's obvious. No, honestly, I spoke to somebody, and she said, I can't even talk to you about the breakfast schedule now, because she's like, I can't. I can't. It's messed up. And she's got three kids, and she's a
right.
professional, and her husband's a professional, and they have to get out the door.
Yup.
And it didn't have to be that way
Right.
before. Do you know what I mean? It
Right.
was like, I
No,
can
totally.
focus on this, get the kids out of my hair,
Right.
lovingly so, and
No,
then
any parent
get
out there will
get
understand
really good
exactly
work
what you
done.
mean. Right.
Right. And then just get good work done. So exactly,
So,
100%.
it's really, I mean, we kind of really went way off topic, but I mean, it's just, I don't know, like, I'm encouraged that more people and more locations are getting in on the quantum game and not just defaulting to Silicon Valley or the Pacific Northwest. I'm encouraged
I
by that.
agree. I am encouraged by that, and I'm encouraged by the diversity of professional roles
Yes.
of people who are interested and are leaning into their curiosity.
Yes.
And I have a newsletter, the Tech Whisperer, and we have like, I don't know, 1,600 and change people that are just actively interested in what's going on, and the makeup of those people is tremendously interesting. And our viewers, and we've been getting a lot more views on YouTube. So we suggest to please, join our mailing list, and we will keep you informed of when new episodes release and new content releases that's about quantum computing. So we can
And
all
how
learn
would
together.
one join our mailing list, Candace?
Well, you have to go to impactquantum.com, and then it's super.
Us, right?
And there's a join us, and you simply give us your email and you click, and you're golden. And then we can use that list to let you know about, what's the next show or what's the next article that has been released. We're gonna figure out our frequency. But we'd love for you to join us.
Excellent. I can't think of a better way to end this episode. What do you think?
Well, I think that's great. Maybe you should have Bailey take us out.
It's awesome. I think I'll do that.
And that wraps up another quantum-powered episode of Impact Quantum. If your brain isn't buzzing with the possibilities of photonic qubits and hybrid architectures, then frankly, were you even listening? A massive thanks to Frank and Candace for navigating the quantum chaos with their usual wit, wisdom, and just the right amount of caffeinated bravado. Now, if you enjoyed this conversation, and let's be honest, of course you did, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Whether you're tuning in from a quantum lab, your commute, or the comfort of your data-driven den, spreading the word helps us reach even more curious minds. And for the truly committed, pop over to impactquantum.com and join our mailing list. No spam, just quantum goodness. Until next time, stay curious, stay caffeinated. And remember, the quantum future is